You're sitting across from a USCIS officer. They ask how you met your spouse. Your honest answer, the one you think sounds perfect, is exactly what gets your case flagged. Here's what's actually happening. Today, I'll show you the 5 interview mistakes that trigger closer scrutiny under INA Section 216. And more importantly, I'll show you how to avoid those mistakes before your interview, so you can walk into that room prepared instead of anxious. Let me be direct with you. This is the question almost every couple gets wrong, and it's the easiest one to fix. The officer looks down at your file. Then they ask, "How did you meet your spouse?" Now, I want you to think right now, what would you say? Take a second. If your answer starts with, "We met on Tinder," or another dating app, here's what you need to know. Meeting on a dating app does not make your marriage suspicious, and you should never lie to a USCIS officer. Honesty is always the right answer, but here's what's actually happening. If the dating app becomes the entire story, officer may naturally ask more questions about how your relationship developed. Instead, lead with what happened after that first connection. For example, we first connected online. A few weeks later, we met for dinner. We kept seeing each other. Our families eventually met, and over time, our relationship became serious. Notice the difference. You're not hiding how you met. You're showing how your relationship became a real relationship. That's what the officer is trying to understand. This is not about changing your story. It's about telling the complete story. Here's another important point. SCIS officers are not looking for the most romantic answer. They're looking for a real answer. One that sounds natural. One that sounds like 2 people remembering the same experience, not 2 people repeating the same script. If you're worried because you never practiced this question, don't panic. Sit down with your spouse. Talk about how you met. Talk about your first conversations, your first date, the moment you realized the relationship was great. Becoming serious. Don't rehearse. Remember, real memories include small details, and those details often make honest couples sound more believable than any perfect answer ever could. But here's the part most couples don't expect. Even if your meeting story sounds completely genuine, the next mistake can still create serious problems. Because after learning how your relationship started, the officer wants to know when everything happened. And that's where many honest couples accidentally tell 2 different timelines. The officer closes your file, then opens another page. Now the interview feels different. They look at you and ask, "When did you decide to get married?" Now I want you to think, right now, what would you say? Take a second. This question sounds simple, but here's what's actually happening. Immigration law requires USCIS officers to determine whether a marriage was entered into in good faith. One of the ways they do that is by testing your timeline. They're not asking when you got married. They're asking when the decision to marry was actually made. Now imagine this. The officer asks the husband, "When did you decide to get married?" He answers, "January 2024, after she received her employment authorization. We finally felt financially ready." A little later, the officer asks the wife the same question. "When did you decide to get married?" She answers, "September 2023. He proposed while we were on vacation in Miami." Both answers sound honest, but together, they tell 2 different stories. That's the problem. Here's what's actually happening. SCIS is not comparing perfect memories. They're looking for a consistent timeline. When important dates change, the officer naturally starts asking more questions. Not because they know your marriage isn't real, but because they now need to understand why the stories don't match. The good news is, this mistake is one of the easiest to prevent. Before your interview, sit down together. Start with the day you met, then walk through your relationship step by step. Your first date, when you became serious, when you decided to get married, when you announced your engagement, and when you started planning your wedding. If you can naturally tell the same timeline, you'll walk into the interview with much more confidence. The officer leans forward. Then they ask, "Walk me through a normal weekday in your home." Now I want you to think, right now, what would you say? Take a second. This question sounds casual, but here's what's actually happening. The officer isn't asking about your schedule. They're trying to understand whether you truly share a daily life together. USCIS officers look for signs that married couples actually live as a family. That's why ordinary routines often matter more than dramatic stories. Imagine this. The officer asks one spouse, "What time do you usually wake up?" They answer, "I wake up around 6. I make coffee. My spouse gets up about an hour later." Later, the officer asks the other spouse the same question. "We usually wake up together around 7. Then we have breakfast before work." Neither answer sounds suspicious by itself, but together, they describe two completely different mornings. That's what catches the officer's attention. Here's what you need to know. USCIS isn't expecting identical answers. Real couples remember things differently. Small differences are completely normal. But when your daily routines consistently point in different directions, the officer naturally wants to understand why. The good news is, you can prepare for this without memorizing anything. A few days before your interview, sit down with your spouse. Talk about an ordinary weekday. Who wakes up first? Who makes coffee? Who cooks dinner? What time you usually get home? What you normally do before going to bed? Don't turn it into a rehearsal. Just have a normal conversation. You'll be surprised how many little details come back naturally. Those real memories are much more believable than perfectly rehearsed answers. The officer closes your file, then reaches for another folder. Now they stop asking about your memories. They start looking at your evidence. Here's what you need to know. A real relationship should tell one consistent story, not just through your answers, but through your documents too. Now I want you to think, right now, if the officer asked you for proof that you share your life together, what would you hand over? Take a second. Many couples immediately reach for photographs. Photos are helpful, but they are only one small part of the picture. Here's what's actually happening. SCIS officers compare your documents with everything you've already said. If your answers describe one life, but your paperwork describes another, the officer naturally begins asking more questions. Imagine this. You tell the officer you've lived together for almost 2 years. Then, the lease only shows one person's name. You explain that you share your finances, but neither spouse appears on the other's bank account. You say you filed taxes together, but you can't provide a joint tax return. None of these things automatically mean your marriage isn't real, but together, they create questions that the officer now has to answer. That's why your documents matter. Here's what I'd recommend. Before your interview, lay everything out on a table. Your lease or mortgage, joint bank statements, joint tax returns, utility books, bills, insurance policies, travel records, photos with family and friends. As you look through them, ask yourselves one simple question. Do these documents support the story we're telling? If the answer is yes, you're moving in the right direction. If something doesn't match, take the time to understand why before your interview. This is the mistake that creates the most anxiety, because this is the moment many couples never expect. The officer looks at both of you, then says, "I'd like to speak with each of you separately." Now, I want you to think, right now, how would you feel? Take a second. Most honest couples become nervous, not because they've done anything wrong, but because they weren't expecting this. Here's what's actually happening. If an officer needs more information about your relationship, they may conduct what's known as a Stokes interview. Instead of speaking to you as a couple, they speak to each spouse separately. Then they compare your answers. The goal isn't to catch honest mistakes. The goal is to understand whether your relationship is genuine. Now imagine you're sitting in that room alone. The officer asks, "What side of the bed does your spouse sleep on? What did the two of you have for dinner last night? When was your last argument? Who usually wakes up first? What television show are you watching together right now?" Now, stop for a moment. What would you say? Would your spouse answer those questions the same way? Small differences are normal. Real couples don't remember every detail exactly the same. But when the answers describe completely different lives, the officer naturally wants to understand why. The good news is, this is something you can prepare for. Tonight, sit down with your spouse. Ask each other these same questions. Not like a test, just like a normal conversation. You'll quickly discover which answers naturally match and which ones need another conversation. That's much better than discovering those differences during your interview. The final checklist. Before we finish, I want to leave you with one final checklist. I'm going to keep it on the screen for a few seconds. Count to 3, then take a screenshot. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Now let's go through it together. Number 1. Can both of you naturally explain how you met? Number 2. Can both of you describe your wedding using the same timeline? Number 3. Can both of you walk through a normal weekday together? Number 4. Do your documents support the story you've shared today? And number 5. Have you asked each other the same everyday questions a USCIS officer might ask during a Stokes interview? If you can honestly answer yes to all 5, you'll walk into your interview feeling much more prepared. Not because you've memorized answers, but because you've reviewed your real life together. That's exactly what honest couples should do. Bridges. Before you go, I'd like to hear from you. Where are you in your immigration journey? Have you already received your interview date? Are you still waiting for your appointment? Or have you already completed your interview? Leave your answer in the comments below. I read as many of them as I can, and they help me decide which videos to make next. In my next video, I'm going to explain what happens after the marriage green card interview. We'll talk about approval timelines, requests for evidence, conditional green cards, and what to expect after your interview is over. If you don't want to miss that video, subscribe now. Here's the bottom line. USCIS is not looking for perfect couples. They're looking for honest couples whose answers, documents, and everyday lives all tell the same story. Don't try to sound perfect. Don't try to memorize every answer. Prepare together, tell the truth, and let your real relationship speak for itself. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourself. Take care of your family. And I'll see you in the next video.